considering we have 2,740 feet to paint.
Do you think about that number at night? You're just like 2,035 today, 2,000.
I'm not numeric, so
Oh, okay.
luckily I'm not numeric and I'm not sequential.
Oh,
So
okay.
the reason I can live through my life is I don't keep, people think, oh, you should be knowing what you have tomorrow. No. The truth is, if I don't know what's tomorrow, I can live through today.
Well,
Right? I can't, but if I look at my calendar and looks like a shotgun, I panic.
I live in that world of numerical panic.
Panic.
Because it's always about words for me. I have like this many pages and this many words makes up this many.
Oh yeah, no. It's like I guess it would be the same for me in feet, except I won't hold the numbers.
I'm like, it's just all numbers.
It's hard for people to even get what 2,000 feet looks like.
Yeah, I would.
What you're looking at in this room is 200.
That's still like, I mean, I think they would think in square footage. That'd be the closest in terms of property and apartments and things like that.
Yes, this square footage is hard to fathom because basically, so you're looking at a segment here that's about, I would say 40 feet by 10 feet. So this is about 400 square feet. But actually the entire 425 feet of the 60s is in this room on the rolls.
Wow.
Which is pretty cool, you can see the whole thing. That means as the 70s are ready to go, as soon as we get through this, then we roll out the 70s.
Are you excited about that one? Do you feel like that's where you were jamming in the 70s?
Yeah, no, I was actually, yes, in a certain way, the 70s it has some very powerful things in it. It has Roe versus Wade, it has, but this is the era that I lived through. The war in Vietnam, my friends getting drafted, the Nina and, the generation on fire, of people going on the bus rides and I was really young, right? But it was a very powerful experience, and then she got a moratorium and when I was at the moratorium and I was at the major marches, this actually goes into a march in Century City against the Vietnam War that I was at. Oh, thank you so much.
I'm going to write there.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you were rolling.
It's not my friend, so thank you.
Have you tried lemon before?
No. Is it working?
No, only, the only thing that works is ice.
I promise it will.
Oh, it will?
It's from my grandmother.
When she started putting mustard on my fingers, I thought, oh, this is familiar. This is my grandmother putting all kinds of weird stuff on me. God knows what she put in those little amulet that's around my neck.
Test
Yeah.
him speaking. This is a test. This is a microphone test.
Can you hear me? How's the sound? Good? And you want me facing camera or am I talking to Claudia?
I think it's easier for you.
Okay.
No, we're good. Yeah.
Thank you.
The other Claudia.
All right, we're ready.
Do you need this thing? No, just for sure.
I'm just going to adjust your overall one last time.
Okay.
Just to bring it back here a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, pretty flat. That's great. Okay. So we're gonna start filming. We're gonna start filming.
We're going to start.
Great, thank you.
Paint quietly.
They're doing great. Okay,
Okay.
so we're just gonna go over the questions. We're going to go over the questions, and if you could, so if I ask, like, what is your favorite color? Don't say like blue, say my favorite color is.
Okay.
You know, that kind of structure.
Uh-huh.
That's
And
it.
ask you to speak up.
Okay,
Okay. Because I'm hard of hearing and also this room.
right,
Yeah.
okay, definitely. How close can I get without getting in the frame?
You can go closer if you want.
Yeah, you're not in vision. You're not there yet.
A little bit. I can see you.
There?
You're good there.
Okay,
Okay.
like this level speaking?
That's good.
Okay. And then wait for the train?
Closer to Carlos's camera.
Yeah. This? Is this close enough? Okay.
You know, when you want to do any pickup shots, you can get up in the scaffolding and get a better view.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna start. And then if you need to reference the image in any way, I can hold it up for you.
Okay.
Okay, so the train's coming. We're gonna wait for the train.
Yeah, that's loud, isn't it?
So we may stop a couple times through the train.
Yeah, the room moves a little bit too.
Okay. Now? Okay. Can you please describe who you are, i.e. your name, artist, Chicana, muralist? Why don't we start there? Why don't we cut that? So just who are you? How do you identify? That sort of thing. Like
Okay.
my name is blah, blah, blah.
So I guess I have so many things to identify with, right? My name is Judith Francisca Baca. I am a muralist, a visual artist, a Chicana activist, and you know, a founder of a major arts organization.
What's the name of the
I'm the founder of the Social and Public Art Resource Center, along with 2 other women who were my partners in the making of this place.
Okay, so please explain Uprising of the Mujeres to someone who has never seen it before. So
Okay.
kind of like navigate visually what's going on.
Well, maybe you can hold up the image
Yeah.
for me. So I can talk about it sequentially. Well, the Uprising of the Mujeres is a portable mural. It was designed in 1977 in the Taller Siqueiros, where I was studying with about 26 other artists from around the world. A whole group of Chicano artists went, primarily from Texas and the Southwest. All of them were men. I was the only woman in the workshop. And in that workshop, we were producing a work as a team and learning the techniques of the maestro. It's 8 feet by 24 feet, as I said. It's on portable panels. And it's a piece in which I was kind of speaking back to the idea that women were disempowered. The central image of the piece is an indigenous woman who comes up out of the fields and out of the city. She's magical. She's partially a real figure, and then part of her is actually not in this world, but in the next. And she is leading a whole group of people who are speaking back to many of the issues that we were addressing at this particular time. The left-hand side of the mural shows a city councilman using the projects, and that's the Strata Courts, as his desktop. And in it, he's moving monies about that looks like on a checkerboard. And what you see is he's allotting out of human welfare and human needs monies into the defense budget, and which also meant the police budget. So in other words, it was about controlling the people as opposed to making the life better. And one of the project boxes, the apartments in the projects, which house about 500 people, is a coffin. And it had to do with my experience of working in the neighborhoods with the loss of young men in gang warfare and the struggles that were going on, which are still going on, really. But at that time, it was very, very high loss of young people. The projects are numbered with numbers on the rooftops because it's a movement from a time in which there was community policing into aerial policing. Helicopters were brought in, and these helicopters would patrol the areas and could identify the places to get people by the numbers on the top of the projects. There's also a young man who is turning a wheel, and out of that, pretty often, don't they go off very often?
13 minutes.
Every 13 minutes? Okay.
There's a young, in the foreground, there's a young man turning a wheel. He's churning, and what he's churning is a conveyor belt. And that conveyor belt is rolling out dollars. And there's one coin that says, in God we trust, and it says, in Him we trust. And it has to do with a sort of patriarchal power and movement of money by people like this councilman, who was a nemesis. He was a person who opposed all of the work I tried to do, working with young people in the neighborhoods. So every time my projects would come up for a vote in the council, he would speak against them, saying, we need to be putting these young people in jail, we need to be incarcerating them, not supporting them. It's very much similar. We're seeing this rise again right now as we're dealing with the anti-immigrant sentiment in this particular election. And this, of course, is not the first time we have lived through it. The right-hand side of the mural is, you see men carrying babies in the back, and you see this incredible spiritual figure, who is actually a woman that I saw in the street in Cuernavaca, where I was studying at the taller. And I asked her if she would pose for this piece. And she said, no, I have to ask my husband. And I asked him, and he said no. He could control her image, could control what she did with her body. She had no right to even say, yes, I would love to be in this mural. And of course, she really wanted to be. She knew what we were doing. And so I memorized her face. So this is my memory of this particularly beautiful woman who was sitting on a street corner, rocking her baby and making a sound that my grandmother used to make when she rocked me as a child. And so it was like, wow, where did that sound come from? It's something really deep in my history. But an indigenous woman rocking her baby and soothing that child. So that's, the Uprising of Mujeres is about power of women. It's about the labor that we produced in the country. It's focused in Los Angeles because that's where I was working. And I produced it after I left the Taller Siqueiros because it was not accepted by my team.
Great. Okay. So we may have to repeat some of those things because we're going to get a little bit more detailed. But that was a good overview for sure. Thank you. So we're just going to get a little bit more detailed with each of the questions. It's fine if you repeat.
Okay.
So this one is, what was the Siqueiros workshop? And what was your experience as a participant?
The Taller Siqueiros was actually newly opened after his death. And it was run by Luis Arenal and Angelica, his wife. And they invited people from the Southwest. I guess it was kind of a money-making intention. So we paid to come. And a number of us from the Southwest decided that we really needed to go and to learn the techniques of the maestro. It was haphazardly organized, but it was in a marvelous space in which the floors actually had grids in them that you could pull back and the panels could drop into the floor so that we didn't have to climb so much. There were ropes and climbing areas and very rickety scaffolding. There was a tremendous caste system. The indigenous people were sent to up the ropes and up the ladders, and those of us who were, coming from Chicano experience in the Southwest were shocked at this sort of hierarchy. There were bathrooms for the maestros and bathrooms for the students, and we were not allowed to share bathrooms. There was a separation of the indigenous and all of us, and we very quickly decided that we would go and sit outside with the indigenous people and break down those barriers that were basically a class system. people were brought in. There was Chilean muralists there. There were muralists from Russia there at the same time. So it was an interesting movement of muralists from around the world. And we were taught, I mean, I learned some very, very important things that transformed my work in that workshop. One was the encouragement of the Chilean artists, who, in particular, I'm not remembering his last name, but Fernando was a muralist in Chile who was painting the rivers. And when he saw my work on the Great Wall, had begun the Great Wall, he was very encouraging about me continuing to do the Great Wall. And because I was like, I actually had planned only to do one summer. And that, you know, I had 80 people. We did 1,000 feet. And it was really rough working across neighborhoods and gang affiliations and with gender issues and all of that. I was like, it was rough. The first year was very rough at the Great Wall. And I thought, I don't need to do this again, right? And it was both the youth and the encouragement from these other muralists who said, paint the river, paint the river. And it partially why I went back to do another series in the Great Wall. So there would be speakers that would come in at night, and during the work day we were tasked with producing a portable mural. And we worked in teams. So the teams were all mixed up, and I was on one team with 10 artists, and each of the teams, I think it was less than 10, maybe 7 of us. And I worked with some people from Texas, some guys from Texas. And they were sympathetic to what I was doing, but they were very, very firm that the image that they wanted to produce for our work was a spread eagle woman with a funnel in her mouth. And she was getting poured consumer products. I actually have some of those images. Because they were at that point saying that women were becoming the heads of households in the United States, and that they were responsible for this massive growth in consumerism, and that they were the reason that it was occurring, and that people were changing their value systems. And I felt that it was basically a rape image, and that I said, I can't paint that. And they painted it. My team painted that mural, and I did not. I did the drawings for this piece.
Great. Wonderful. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the sketch.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that one that the Smithsonian has. Okay, so what happens during a mural sketch, and what was changed or articulated throughout your Uprising of the Metis drafts? So this question is more like, what does the sketch serve? So imagine you're a layman, you have no idea how mural processes work. So how would you explain what the sketch serves? Mm-hmm. That's kind of what the question is getting at. Mm-hmm. And then the different drafts. What's changing as you're developing the scene? Mm-hmm. What changed throughout your sketches for this mural?
Well, that's relying a bit on, very long memory from long ago, right? And I don't remember exactly all the refinements. But the original rough sketch was done in Mexico. That's why it's on the paper that it's on. It's a particular paper that basically we don't even have here. So I started the drawing there, and when I came back, I began to hone it and refine it. And then, develop the portable panels, very similar to what we were doing in the Taller Sigueros. I changed, I thought that it wasn't clear enough, that there were so many little additions that could make it real. Like in the background on the graffiti on the wall, for example, really identified where it was. And it said, "Mi barrio aquí controlan." And of course, that was, and my experience was that you had no control of this area. And primarily young men thought they did. I put, "Mi barrio aquí no controlan," and showed who was controlling that area.
Do you need to put more ice?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. Yeah. It doesn't stop hurting like really bad. It's still.
Do you need to take like a Tylenol or ibuprofen?
Yeah, maybe something like that. I'll take it later. I don't want to do it right now.
Okay.
I'm not a great pill swallower, and
It would be
I don't want to be
weird on
choking
camera.
on this. Huh?
It'd be weird on camera.
Yeah.
Did you want to go back to the Aquino Controla?
I'm sorry.
Did you want to say the Aquino Controla part?
I can't hear you.
Okay, where you're talking about the graffiti.
Yes. Okay. Aquí no controlan. ¿No? Well, one of the things that I added in the refinement of the sketch was things that I saw daily. What I saw daily on the walls in the Strata courts was "Mi barrio aquí controlan," which was a sort of wish by the young men of the Barrio Nuevo, which is what they call them. The neighborhood was called. But my experience was that they didn't have any control, that they were subject to call-outs in the middle of the night. Their families and them brought into the middle of the center of the projects to be searched because somebody had shot at a cop, and that meant your grandparents and your parents, the children, everybody be brought out, and it was in a sense, as they said, it was being in prison. They were not different than being in prison. Being in the projects was similar. And already, as I started to study the projects, I recognized that we already knew that they were failed attempts at low-income housing. That when you jam 500 people into an area like that, and these projects were going on after the war all over the country, and people who were project planners or housing planners knew they did not work, that they had to come up with other methods of finding low-income housing. For one, with more space, so that there were gardens and open areas. So I put on the wall, "Mi barrio aquí no controlan," so that it was a message to the young people that they had to look and recognize why they didn't control. And that's why I used the figure of a recognizable figure. He probably would have seen himself and known that it was him. And he was a councilman that I had to keep coming up against in the city council, who was very anti-immigrant, and many of these people were not immigrants. They were born in the city. They were multiple generations in this area. But many of them also had been in the projects since the founding of the projects. And I show him using the projects as a method of a desktop, as a method of exerting control in the city council.
Okay. So now we're going to talk about the portability. So why did you decide to make Uprising of the Mujeres portable, and what locations did it end up and why?
Uprising of Mujeres was portable because there wouldn't be a wall in the city of LA that I could put it up on. It would have never been left. In other words, the content of that mural was too controversial. So, like for example, there's a number of pieces that could never go on the wall, even to this day. Right? A criticism of the LAPD, that would be really difficult to get on a wall, right? An openly gay image, right? Like I think, for example, there's a segment in the new mural that are two young men kissing. I think it's going to be a really controversial piece of the mural. An armed person of color, impossible. To this day, you could never put that on a wall. The Uprising of Mujeres had a number of transgressions. Transgression against men because women were leading. So even my colleagues and my, compañeros in the mural movement would have opposed it, right? And the second is that it was indicting a political figure. That would have been impossible as well. So I made it portable so I could move it and you couldn't destroy it. Right? So, I mean, I could duck and cover. I could pull it away and take it away and bring it. We've used the portability in a number of places for that reason. And it had an interesting life. It was in the Hollywood Bowl at one point on a peace activist event. And thousands of people saw it. It was on the city street across from Spark for a period of time. It was set up on a standing stands and it was set up in temporary installations. It even found its way into trucks moving about the city in the Agnes Varda film Muro, which I love what she did with it. She actually contextualized it in front of a bank and in front of different places in the city to add to the content of the mural.
Okay, great. Okay, so now we're going to go more on the council member.
Mm-hmm.
Your favorite subject. So
Mm-hmm.
you've kind of covered some of it, but we can repeat it. So how was your relationship with council member Robert M. Wilkinson? And why did you decide to feature him in the mural? If you could say, I featured Mr. Wilkinson or Robert, like his name, when you're responding.
Okay.
Yeah.
I featured Councilman Wilkinson in the mural because he continually voted against the programs that we proposed that would give young people jobs, particularly from the neighborhoods in the east side. He was, I can't remember, I believe that his, does it say what district he was from?
No.
Okay. I can't remember. Councilman Wilkinson was not the councilman of the east side, but he was the councilman in the San Fernando Valley. So I had to come up against him on the Great Wall and also in the city council. But he spoke so vehemently against basically Mexican people and about the fact that we needed to enhance punishment and incarceration, and that these young people did not deserve jobs. They deserved longer periods in prison and incarceration, which was a very short-sighted thought. Very short-sighted. And so the reason that I used him was just as an example, really. He wasn't the only councilman that was like that. And you have to remember that we had no representation of councilmen, Latino councilmen. Not on the, we didn't have them on the, Board of Education. We didn't have them in the city council. We didn't have representation of people of color on images in the billboards. So in other words, we weren't even marketing to them at that point. In this period of time, to find a large-scale image that would relate to the populations of our people didn't exist, did not exist. So the idea that when I put up Mi Abuelita, the first mural I ever painted in 1970 in Hollenbeck Park, that was an outrageous act. She was a woman, she was a brown woman, she was clearly a Mexicana, and she had the children dancing in her arms in a band show. That was a positive image of a Latina. And that really related to the people. And they loved the piece. And the boys came out from various gang members to help me put it up. So Councilman Wilkinson spoke against everything we were for. We knew how to do transformation. We knew how to stop the gang activity or how to advance young people's well-being and to give them opportunities to do positive things in their neighborhoods. But we had resistance from powerful men like Wilkinson. And I say men. They were all male. There was almost no woman. I think there might have been one woman in the city council at that point. And no people of color. That's what we were up against. And that's the climate in which I began the first citywide mural program. Ridiculous. And I don't even know why I did it. I took a beating. I had to deal with sexism. I would have to go into the bars to deal with the city councilman. You want to talk to Councilman Snyder? He's in the bar across the street, in the police bar. And I would have to open the door there were billy clubs. The handles were billy clubs. I have a vision of that, and I never forget it. And I'd walk into this bar with all these guys, and I would walk in, and the councilman would say, "Hey, baby, what do you want today? Come and have a beer." And if I was lucky, I would avoid the slap in the butt. Young women need to know that's what it was like. And that I could not even get a credit card. Because I'd left my husband, when I left my husband in about 1971 or so, and I was the breadwinner. He was still in the university. I could not get a credit card. The relatively recent period of these changes, really very short period, and now we're looking at a time in which it's rolling back. So when Kamala says we won't go back, we have to move forward, it must be taken literally, because it's not that long ago that we had no rights. And I believe there were people like Wilkinson would have voted against women having the right to vote. That's what I believe. I saw them in action, and I witnessed it. In witnessing it, it made me more clear about what my job was, and that the arts was not simply a pastime or something for entertainment or the creation of simple beauty. It was about transformation, spiritual transformation. It was a way that we could reach the hearts and the souls of the people that we spoke to. We could talk to them in ways through the arts that we couldn't do in a city council meeting. They would cut me off on the mic. You got 1 minute. That's it, shut up.
That was excellent.
So my work would sit on the streets for months and for years. And every day, you could hear the message.
That's good. You're good.
I still believe that. It's like I'm old school. It's not, I'm not doing this for your entertainment.
Okay. So we're going to go back to some icons in the mural.
Yes.
So there's that specific city hall.
Yep.
So you may be kind of repeating yourself, but it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you included the Los Angeles City Hall and the landscape. So why did you place that in the image?
I spent a lot of time in City Hall. I was at City Hall weekly, putting my high heels on and my, my little suits, and I would walk out, put on my overalls, and go onto the street. I was making these great transformative moments in between my lives. My life was really on these two sides of, working in the street and then being in the City Hall, in the halls of City Hall, to make these changes and to speak to people about what could be done and gathering support. So City Hall is really, it's an icon that represents the power that we had to come and garnish and begin to transform. And of course today, we've transformed a great deal in terms of representation. And then if we've got rolled back with our representation saying bad things about African American, I'm sure you followed the controversy about that. But that's not uncommon, because Los Angeles has always been played against Black and Latino. That's always been this struggle between the two powers within the city.
Wonderful. Okay. So we're going to talk about this area you discussed at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to go over it again.
Mm-hmm.
About the numbers. So what is the significance of the numbers atop the housing structure? And then what does the graffiti say? The no barrio aquí no controlan. And so cover that, if you could discuss that.
Okay. My representation of the housing projects is it's sort of based on strata courts in East Los Angeles, but it's based basically on housing projects across the country in various communities. And I took directly from graffiti that was on the wall that I saw that said, "Mi barrio aquí controlan." And the thought that was, and I think of it as kind of a wish, you know, that this is our territory, this is a place that we control. But in truth, what I was pointing out in the way that I wrote it on the wall, "Mi barrio aquí no controlan." You have no control over your neighborhood. You think you do, but you don't. Because the fact that the police could come in at any moment and call out your families, there were all kinds of, there were curfews that were not put into place. And young people had to be off the street at 8:30. If they were leaving an organized activity that I had in a park, and they were 1 minute past 8:30 in the evening, because we played basketball too long, then they could be arrested. And in one case, I came across that. I was packing up. My boys, and we had been playing basketball, because when I was younger, I was a pretty good basketball player. And they were leaving, and they got stopped because they were past the curfew. And one of them was laying on the ground, bloodied, because he'd been hit by a cop. And I went and I pulled up my identification. I said, "This is an organized city activity." And basically they told me, "Back off, unless you want to go to jail." So we had no control. And this is this kind of, you know, policing that was selectively enforced, the kind of treatment of young people on the street, and basically our neighborhoods as a whole, was the life that people lived. And I wanted to point out that what we needed to do, of course, was to find representation, to find ways to be more in control of our communities and to organize. And that was the time when it was beginning. People were beginning to organize.
Okay, it's a good place to stop. Okay. Do you need more ice?
Highly recommend, do not burn your fingertips. Look at the way it's like, you know, going up it's actually more of it's burned than I knew, right? It's like
I can also go get some more fresher ice too.
Yeah,
Or
let's-
ask
Yeah.
Claudia. Because you guys can keep rolling and I'll just run off. Do you want some mustard? Do you want me to try to get some mustard?
well, yeah, I'll try it. I'll try anything. If it reduces pain, yeah.
We could take a break.
The Russian folkway is like there's another. It's like this. Yeah, this like berry.
It's a berry that you
That's
put.
like what my grandmother did. Like it's like the Russian folkway. It's like this. I don't know what it's called in English though.
You know, they actually, it's like those old remedies really work. I mean,
It does
and they
work.
take aspects of it and put it into drugs,
Right.
right?
But you guys can keep rolling and I can go get some
Well, we can also eat and get.
I'll have a bite of this now.
Okay.
Okay. So I have a little bit of. You know what I'd really like is for you guys to show. Maybe you would show my team what we're talking about.
Oh,
Hey, you guys! Do you want to see what is going to the Smithsonian and we're talking about in terms of the content of this work? It's kind of cool because she's got it all here. The original drawings that were done in Mexico. I don't even have these anymore, so this is a one time you can get it. And Claudia is an expert on this. They know stuff about this mural that I don't know.
so I'm working
Because they did this X-ray, so you can tell them.
Yeah, so what the project is, so I was working at Smithsonian American Art Museum in DC, and we acquired and so they hired a conservator who did several examinations of it at all these different layers, so we're able to see the underdrawing and like the different versions of it. So what this is going to become is this digital tour where you can kind of click in certain areas, you'll hear her talking about it, and there'll be more information about the work. And then there'll be this other version where you can see all these different layers of it underneath. So this is what's going to, now, and also this mural is going to be part of the reinstallation at Smithsonian American Art Museum. It's a museum in Chinatown. It shares a building with the National Portrait Gallery. So in museums, there's usually a permanent collection that's always on display. And so this is going to be part of their reinstallation. So this will be up probably by the end of by next year, because they're talking about what's going to go next to you. They're asking me about that too.
Well, right now they told me that it was next to the Thomas Hart Benton area.
Well, yeah, it's going to be in a different area.
Oh, okay, yeah, I know.
So they're moving that. But anyway, so what we're getting from Judy is the specifics, like who's this guy? So like if you don't know anything about Judy or the painting or LA, like they don't know, like this is City Hall. So it's like the very obvious things, to an LA resident, just people don't understand or don't know, or they don't know, what this Spanglish or like urban graffiti is. So
Mi
you're really
barrio
doing,
aquí no controlan,
I think I
because the
remember-
boys were writing aquí controlan,
people
and
don't-
I put the opposite, right? And that guy, I indicted Councilman Robert Wilkinson. He's a real guy, a real jerk. Opposed every mural program, was anti-Mexican. He sounded like Trump, exactly anti-immigrant.
Perfect.
But yeah, there he is. It's a long continuum of this. There he is. And look at the desktop. It's the housing project is his desktop. And look where the money is going, into defense. But it means also the police, as opposed to giving money to human welfare and to, I was advocating for jobs in mural painting and for my teams to get paid. I did get them to do it at a certain point. But this guy, he was after me every minute to stop me. Anyway, I got him. He's forever remembered in this way.
Nice.
Don't you think? That's the only power we have, guys.
Trying to explain who's that guy.
Yeah.
Put a photo of him, in this. It's a tour.
Are you going to put a photo of him?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So to know. Yes.
Would there be an online queue for those who can't visit the actual institution to
Well, this
to
is
sort of
all
prompt
online.
them to
This
see this?
whole conversation is online. Like it's a digital experience.
Because you don't have to
Wow.
be present on site to
Yeah,
experience
they
that.
might put it they might create an area so you can experience it on site next to it, but it's really built for just the web space.
Nice.
So you don't have to go to DC to get all that explanation. And so it's part of this whole Smithsonian Institution they have several units. And so they have this whole push to do these 3D scans of objects. So the mural's been 3D scanned. So you can really see it all these different levels.
You have to show them the scans. I mean, they went down, they could see through
Yeah.
the very first marks I made with his x-rays. Unbelievable.
Yeah, they're really high res scans. So that's what this is. And so we're trying to get her voice in this conversation because some people don't know what she sounds like or looks like or anything. So it's all part of that experience.
So if you look at these images here, this image is a woman. Actually, it's very telling because I proposed this at the Taller Siqueiros. I was in a team. There was 26 people in the Taller, and it was 1977. It was right after Siqueiros died. It was run by Luis Arenal, his brother-in-law, and Angelica, his wife. And 26 of us came from all around the world. A number of us from the Southwest. Mostly, there was all Chicano guys. There was no women, just me, one woman, okay? And muralism was not for women. Siqueiros even wrote, someday there'll be a woman strong enough to be a muralist, but I've not met one yet, right? Right?
Wow.
So he didn't even believe in us as women painters. So in this figure, I proposed this drawing because they said, you guys are going to deal, because you have a woman in your team, you're going to deal with women's consumerism. Because in the beginning of the 70s, they were basically positing that consumerism was growing, and that was going to be part of our problem as political figures. Our politics were such that we were losing our capacity to control by the consumerist culture, right? Mm-hmm. So the image that was produced by my team was a woman spread eagle, like this, with a funnel in her mouth, with all of this goods going into her mouth. Wow. When the drawing came on the table, I brought in this drawing of the figure, and the guys said, no, we don't like that figure. We're going to do this one. So I was overruled, and my figure was, there was one guy from Texas who hung with me. He said, I like this image, but the team overruled me. And so I didn't paint this. I said, well, I'm sorry, I can't paint your piece. I can't put my brush to that image. It's a rape image. You understand, that's rape, right? No. So I didn't get to paint. But I spent a lot of time with the Chileans at that point. And the Chilean artists were working in the rivers in Chile, and they were doing the Chilean Mural Brigade. You know about that group? What they would do is they would get like 8 of them or 10 of them in a line, and each one would have a different bucket, different color, and they would go, one person would go ahead, and they would do the drawing. The second person would follow with color, the third with another, and they could get a piece up in just like a day, right? And they were like a dance team. It was like, I just thought it was the most amazing. I wanted to do a Chilean Mural Brigade in LA, right? I thought it was so cool. And so I talked with them, and there was a guy who, I think his name was Marcos, his name was Fernando Marcos. And he said to me, don't matter what they say. Don't listen to what they say. Paint the river. I said, I'm done with that river, it's too hard. He said, paint the river. And that's why the mural is there. Because this one guy stood up for me and said, paint the river. So show him the other images, because it's kind of cool. You can see the helicopter light, the young dead boy, because there were so many losses in terms of gang warfare. The money, it says, aquí controlan. I mean, it says, in God we trust, but I say, in Him we trust, right? It was all about the sort of patriarchy. The young boy locked in the dollar, locked in the money. And then if you go, you have a couple of other images too that show the drawing. Can you show them? Yeah. So the drawing, they have the drawings, the original drawings. And what we're talking about right now is how, why they were changed and what happened to them. So they actually look at that image first. That's the Taller Siqueiros. And I believe there's a couple of images that show the women with a funnel in her mouth and what they actually painted. They were on portable murals. And there was a grid that moved from the floor, and then they dropped the panels down, right? And so we didn't have to climb. But if there was any climbing, guess who had to climb? The indigenous. Because there was a caste system, right? Wow. Indigenous climbed, the rest of us, and also students, they didn't get to go to the same bathrooms that the maestros went to. So everything was on a caste system. The Chicanos almost instantly went, we're sitting out here with the indigenous. So I remember eating on tin cans, like turned over cans for big cans of beans and stuff. And we'd turn those into little fireplaces, and we'd sit outside and eat with the indigenous, because we didn't like what the people, the Mexicanos were doing, right? So, okay, there's the drawing.
So this is part of the Smithsonian collection, in addition to the mural acquisition. So this is scanned and in the collections. So you can download this off of their website. Which is pretty cool.
Yeah. There's it installed outside of Spark at one point. And then I said it had a life, it went everywhere. Went to the Hollywood Bowl for a peace event. And she's asking why I did it portable. I said, the truth, tell the Smithsonian the truth. It could have never been on the street in LA. They would have never let me get it up. Both, it would have been my,
Someone who's traveling.
cool.
Yeah, and there's
Yeah, you
Agnes
got this
Varda.
shot. I'm glad
Yeah,
you got this shot.
yeah.
I love
That
that.
scene in like the Rumors documentary?
Yeah, that's that, Agnes moving it in front of the bank, and so she contextualized it. And that was the thing that was great about the piece, it could be contextualized in different places, right? And also, do you have one of those x-rays that's so amazing? Look at that. I had no memory that I pounced the second figure, and they could see right through it to the drawing. So that you're recorded forever. You can't ever. You say, "I didn't pounce it." If somebody would ask me, I say, "I didn't pounce it. I gridded it." No, there it is. Evidence. Pounced. So when I came back and I changed the second figure, I did a better drawing of the second figure, and then I pounced it in. Pretty interesting, huh? So that's the job that Claudia and this team is doing right now.
So it's an independent, they've consulted me. I used to be on staff there, and so now I'm in Texas, but we finally got funding like a year ago. It took a while, but it's happening. So this whole conversation will be integrated into that digital experience in about a year.
Yeah, that's wonderful. This is really great. Really great. What are we looking at here?
I burnt my fingers.
Oh no, I'm so sorry. Is it painful?
Oh my God, it's killing me. I touched this.
Yeah, all your nerve endings cells are
Oh,
On a stovetop or something?
huh? I'm putting ice on him. But look, I burnt.
How'd
It
you
was
do
that
Judy?
that stupid. I was trying to curl my hair, and that curling iron, I touched it.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
But look at it. This one is burnt too. But these hurt so much I can't feel that one.
Oh,
Stupid.
ointment.
Like Vaseline or Aquaphor on it. Those are really good.
I think so.
Do people say mustard?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. Check the fridge.
mustard. Well, did you get me some mustard?
I've never heard of that.
Ice. I'm icing, and that's how I'm getting through this. Yeah. I'm just glad it's not my right hand. So that's the film you guys are going to be in. It's going to be in this. Yeah.
Do you want ibuprofen?
Oh yeah. Thank you.
We'll look away.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead.
I'll take it after, but okay. So mustard. This is so weird, right? I can't believe it, but. I'm going to wreck your scarf, though.
It's fine.
I just want to, I'm just gonna.
My fingers smell like something to eat. Okay.
right. If you don't mind, going back to
Is that my mark? Actually, I can feel the mustard working.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, I love that.
Good to know.
Yeah, I'm going to keep that in my back pocket.
Hey, you guys, mustard works. Yeah. It sounds like my fingers are something to eat. Huh? It takes the pain away. Isn't that weird?
Good to know.
Jeez. Try some more. Okay.
Really good.
All these home remedies, right? Good, thank you for that. I mean, they don't get to see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. When I'm here, you might as well use a nerd. That's fine. Yeah, and then once this is done, we could, let me know if you ever want me to talk about it, or Wendy, the conservator with all the digital scans.
Oh, yeah.
That'd be a good, event.
That would be a
And then
great
talk
event.
about the process, and then you can talk about whatever.
We'd love
obviously
that.
The artwork, So, yeah, if you ever want to do that once it's done.
I would really love to do that. I mean, we're going to do a series of events here. We're doing a thing on Reverend Lawson, and we just lost Reverend Lawson, and he's in the first part of this mural. And so the movie that has been made, and Kent Wong, who is head of the Labor Center, who worked with him for 30 years, he'll be speaking.
Nice.
So we're going to do one event after the other that is about the content of this work.
Nice. Okay, yeah, you know my number. Ring me up whenever you need me.
Okay.
Okay.
Did the Smithsonian bring you out here?
Smithsonian, yeah, paid for my travel for this project. yeah.
Okay, good. Well, let's get them out here. We'll get you out here because that we can manage.
Yeah. We'll make it work.
Okay.
Okay, once this goes.
No, we'll go.
Okay, so now we're going to look at the coffin.
The what?
The coffin,
Yes.
this one. So can you tell me a little bit about why the coffin is included? What's that symbol for? That sort of thing.
I was like studying, in talking about housing projects, I became really interested in,
Wait, hold on a second. We're back to filming.
We're back.
We're back, we're back.
Thank you.
Okay, okay. Coffins.
these trains are really noisy. Yeah.
Okay. Whenever you're ready, about the coffins.
Okay. Am I in the right position?
You can.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and we were talking about the coffin.
Yeah. Right.
If you could include why you put that in the scene,
Yeah.
what does that represent, that sort of thing.
Oh, well, as I was doing the representation in the uprising in the Mujeres of the housing projects, I started to study the housing projects and realized that it was bad planning, bad city planning, that we actually had better solutions, and we knew, you know, on a national level, people were speaking about the congregating of people in too small of spaces, and that they were, in a sense, death traps. And so the way that they were configured as these plain boxes, which is one of the reasons why there were 80 murals painted in Estrada Courts, because actually the creation of these murals made them distinguished. They distinguished these boxes that were like basically ticky-tacky boxes. Right? Yeah, Malvina Reynolds' song about the ticky-tacky boxes. And to me, they very closely resembled coffins. And so I took one of them and used that shape as a method of making it a coffin. And I think this was because of the experience I was having with the loss of so many young people in interracial warfare and gang warfare, and you know, the kinds of drive-by shootings that were going on, the lack of jobs, the lack of avenues for young people created more and more loss of teenagers and people from the projects. So the coffin was a way of talking about the mistake of this kind of housing.
Great. The train. That's really good. Okay, it's fine. Okay. So now we're going to go to this figure right there,
Yes.
the factory, the guy cranking.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could tell us a little bit more about that figure, like why is he cranking? What is it representing?
That one's coming right in here.
Yeah, it feels like it went right through.
Yeah, so it's going to run right through here. These trains, I feel like they're coming right in the room. The young man is a metaphor, essentially, for the labor and the economy of the country actually being boosted by immigrant labor. And the fact that it was churning out money for wealth, like the growers of California, and the whole food industry that is California's great claim to fame, and the whole Central Valley. And also within the factories of Los Angeles and all over the country. So the young man is a labor force, represents a labor force that's churning out dollars. And it basically, it also changes the language on the coin from "in God we trust" to "in Him we trust," because essentially it was about power, this same kind of Wilkinson power that was using these people, using the labor, but not accommodating the labor, not providing housing for the labor. So that, for example, workers in the fields of California, some were living literally in pig pens and in caves and without the accurate housing. And then the housing that was created was substandard. And instead of actually saying, okay, we are really, we have a tremendous benefit from immigrant labor or from people who come in, and making it possible for them to go back and forth across the border, like in the Bracero program, for example, was an example of that attempt. But of course that was a failed attempt too, because they didn't make the payments. So actually later in the Great Wall, you'll see in the Great Wall of Los Angeles a whole story about Operation Wetback, for example, and the Bracero program. So we've had this relationship to immigrant labor that has fueled the wealth of our nation, and in California in particular, the wealth of growers and the wealth of industry. And that is the young person's labor. And that's why his back is muscular. That's why he's pushing a big grinding machine that basically doesn't do anything. It just makes money. And the benefit of that does not come back to the communities. So do I call it an indictment? Maybe that's a word too strong, but maybe it isn't. Maybe what I'm saying is, look at this. Look at these choices that are actual choices that we make, that there is not the will to eliminate gang warfare. There isn't a will to eliminate the conditions in poor communities. That all we need to do is use our will and willingness to improve the situation, and to use the creative thoughts of creative people to give people opportunities that will transform these conditions.
Great.
I should have been a preacher.
I would have come to the sermons.
Okay, so now we're going to go to the farm workers in the field.
Mm-hmm.
So this section of it.
Yes.
Okay. So we're gonna-
So the farm workers in the field, there's farm workers in the field, and they represent the two sides of the border. The agave is the division, right? And the agave, of course, is one of the major industries of Mexico. But on one side, it's the same fields, essentially. And that has to do with, long before people were saying it, we didn't cross the border crossed us. Essentially, it's this land. People like my grandparents moved across the border without there being the conditions there are now. It was not, you could move back and forth. And as the border closed, it made it difficult for people. They would come to work, but then they couldn't go back home at the end of the season, and so then they were trapped in California. For example, we just did an exhibition recently at Spark with a group of women from Oaxaca who were weavers and embroiderers, and we reunited the women with their children in Venice, because they were working in the restaurants, and one of the women hadn't seen her son in 14 years. He came on the Bestia, the train, riding the rooftops of the train, and is a worker he's a wonderful cook, and he works in Venice. There's a very large Oaxacan community in Venice, which is where Spark is located. So, in other words, this is about that labor force, which is an ongoing story. It's an ongoing story.
Okay. Great.
And we have saved the economy. I mean, literally, when Los Angeles lost many of its industries, like, you know, the GM plant closed, there was a reduction in jobs and some of these big plants. The economy thrived anyway because of immigrant laborers, the vendedores, the people who were creating a food industry and an industry that supported the immigrant community because there were so many of us. And in a certain way, we didn't have our city go dead. You know, in places like Detroit and other places where the whole city went dead. In Los Angeles, we had a thriving community because we had immigrants, you know, providing, vendedor carts from Michoacan. They're building them and they're getting out elotes and tamales and selling on the streets, and or the trucks, the taco trucks and all of that. These are inventions of immigrants serving populations that need to be served.
Your Boncho series is going to be at that show.
Yes.
Shape of Power.
Yes.
Are you going to that opening in DC?
I want to. When is it?
November 8th.
Oh my
There's a
God!
dinner.
It's coming this winter.
Yeah, and there's a catalog. Have you seen the catalog?
No.
It's coming out in November too. I wrote the essay about your stuff.
Oh, cool.
You and Yolanda, I write about.
Oh, I'm excited to see
I'll
it.
email it to your team.
Oh, great,
It's
great,
through Princeton University Press. So
Wonderful.
it's going to be like a big book.
wonderful. I was very excited to hear about that show. I thought that is going to be something to see. November 8th.
November 8th is the dinner.
Uh-huh. Oh, maybe I can make it. I'll try to make it.
I'll email the team. I'm going to go.
Alicia interviewed Ed Burrell.
We interviewed Ed Burrell also for the same show.
Who? Ed Burrell?
Ed Burrell, yeah.
No kidding. Oh, Ed Burrell?
Yeah, I was up in Bellingham interviewing him in May. Yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah.
He was my colleague.
We saw pictures of the two of you at the Spark building.
Really?
He was there, yeah.
I haven't talked to him in years. What is he doing now? Is he still taking apart cars and building crazy things?
Yep.
He's just a brilliant guy, you know.
Yeah,
a little crazy, but
yeah. But it was fun talking to him, yeah. Yeah, he's still working. He's doing a lot of 3D rendering stuff too. He's gone into using computer stuff with assistants.
really, I would think that because he was really technical.
Yeah, I mean, he has assistants who help him, but he said he was resisting it for a while, but he likes where it's going.
Oh, that's very interesting. Where is he?
In Bellingham in Washington State.
No kidding. Bellingham, right on the border.
Yeah,
I like that little town.
it's really cute.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to this protest scene. Okay, if you could talk a little bit about this grouping. Who are the people? Are they based off of anybody? What's going on in the scene?
Well, actually, they're loosely based on people. The central figure of the woman is a woman I saw, an indigenous woman I saw on the street, rocking her baby, and so I stylized her and created her as sort of a magical figure, and she, as she was rocking the child, she was making a sound that was actually a sound that I recall from my infancy of my grandmother's making a similar sound, right? The kind of dru rocking sound, right? And then the figures behind are, you can see some of them are from Mexico, some of them are cholos from the neighborhood, some of them are, with an apron. The Chihuahuan women always wore aprons in my family. They always had these dresses made that were like aprons because they were constantly cooking and doing all that kind of stuff. And that's who that figure is. And then as you go back, and they're loosely based on people that were probably assistants, and I can't even remember now who they are. But they're real people that very often I see something in somebody's face that recalls a kind of larger iconic figure, because they're everywhere, you know, the classic Mayan figure, or the classic sort of Chihuahuan that almost looks Apache figure, and they go into my head, they go into a memory bank, and when I'm drawing, I don't even know where they come from, but they're there in a catalog of people.
So what are they doing? Is this a protest? Is this a rally? What is the group of people? What are they?
They're rising up. They're basically saying, this is not okay. We need to be paid fair wages. We're standing up for all of the issues that we're facing. And it had to do with problems with the education, had to do with problems with police enforcement, had to do with problems with poverty and housing, and all of the issues, the conditions that we still are dealing with. And, you know, representation, so that we can actually have our voices heard, and the people getting the capacity to get registered and to migrate in a decent way. So, I mean, like, for example, I know people that have been in the country 12 years working and paying taxes and still cannot get their citizenship. So, in other words, we know that system doesn't work. People are speaking about it openly now. In the same way, they're speaking openly about the destruction of our river. But at the time I was doing this work, it was not possible to say that. I could not say that our city fathers made a terrible error in not building alongside of the river in Los Angeles, like all great cities, instead of destroying it and turning it into concrete and damaging the animals and the stories of the people who lived alongside of it. We couldn't say that. That was not something openly discussed. So me painting the river was my way of speaking back to that issue. And this is like people rising up in this sea of blood. In a sense, they're all in red. They're as if they are flowing out of the veins of the people. And that was my intention. And the second figure actually was based on one of the founders of Spark. It doesn't really actually look like her, but she posed for it, and that's where that image came. She still owns that drawing.
Okay, you mentioned her. Is there anything you haven't covered with this figure that you want to discuss?
There were many renditions of that figure, and what can I say about it? She is, as I said, she's stylized, and her braids, the trenzas are you know, Aztec-shaped imagery, and she's pointing out in this poignant way, in a confrontation that is about a simple statement of truth, without rage. Here it is. Look at this. And in your humanity, deal with it. That's what she said. With your humanity, experience it. So the thing is, if you say something hard and critical, you have to do it in a beautiful way, or people won't listen to you. I think we're seeing that right now. In all this battle for this election, we're watching an incredible woman step forward with this grace and beauty. Here it is. Deal with it, with your humanity. I really love that.
Great. Okay, so now Do you need to take a ice break at all? Need to add
Yeah,
ice?
I'm melting ice pretty fast. The heat must be leaving my hand though at some point, don't you think? Don't you think it'll leave it pretty soon? It's probably time for more mustard. You're gonna get your neckerchief back all filled with
You
mustard.
had to autograph it and I'll film it. Mustard hands. touch my
Mustard
mouth.
fingers.
How you doing, Lisa?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mustard and ice. New combination of treatment.
Okay, so now we're at the last section of this mural, and we're looking at the landscape. Could you tell me, is this referencing a specific landscape in the world, or what's going on in this area with the fields and this kind of large building right here as well, after this goes by? Okay.
Clearly, the undulating lines are fields. They're cultivated fields, and and the mountains are California mountains, and these are things that have occupied my visual scape my whole life. So, born and raised in Los Angeles, this is what I've seen my whole life, and also the Central Valley, which I've spent a lot of time in. So it's just the references. Again, it's like this Rolodex of images that get pulled up as I'm drawing, that are all stored. And and I'm not making a distinction between Mexico and California. There is no border. The line is not there. And that looks to me that building is more Mexican than it is American. So it must be from my trip to Mexico, and having just come back, those buildings are in my mind.
Okay.
To me, they get mixed into one salad.
Okay, so now we're going to go to more conservation questions.
Uh-huh.
So whatever you can remember is okay. If you're like, I don't remember, then
Yeah.
this is just reality. Okay. So, does this sound okay? Okay. All right. So, can you explain why you chose to use masonite as the backing material for the portable mural after this is done?
We need 60s music in here. But my painters are painting. Why I use masonite? Okay. Masonite because it was cheap.
Can you rephrase it to?
Oh, no, I chose to.
Yeah.
Okay, I chose to use masonite because it was cheap, and it was accessible. And what I was trying to do was find a wood that would not warp, and to create a backing for it, because it's very hard to get something to make panels that don't warp over time. So I was backing them with pine, and the masonite was very rigid, and it was lightweight enough for me to move about, and it was an available material. Plywood, because it was multiple layers, could actually warp more. It could get any fluid or water in it, and with masonite I didn't have to worry about the edges having water come through it. So I felt that it was a stronger material for the rigors I was going to put the piece through. And I actually really felt that whatever it went through was fine. It was going to go outdoors. It was going to go into a protest. It was going to go into the Hollywood Bowl. It was going to go where it was needed. And therefore, it needed to be really as strong as I could build it, and as lightweight.
Wonderful. Okay. So, what is the Rascuache aesthetic? And how do the materials you used in the mural reflect that concept?
Well, Rascuache has been translated in so many different ways after, our wonderful art historian, just lost his name. Oh yeah, Tomás Ibarra Frausto, who is my dear friend. Tomás's, coining of that terminology was sort of brilliant. I don't know that this reflects the Rascuache aesthetic as much as some other things. And I would define it as Rascuache as meaning you use what you have, what is present. And if you're performing a play and you want people to experience the border, and you have a piece of rope laying on the ground, Rascuache means you'll pick up the rope and make it the border. That it requires a kind of magical realism injected into the moment. And whatever it is, whether it's a garbage can, it can be as modest or as funky as something like that. Maybe the masonite is one of those things. It's building material that's used for hundreds of things. That Rascuache means that you use what is at hand and you make it creatively stand in for what you cannot buy, what you cannot afford. You're not going to be able to have the kind of major scenes and build the scenic designs that will occur for a theater that, for example, has a lot more money. But it doesn't matter. You'll make a pig mask and you'll put it on your face and you'll call the workers out of the fields. You say, brothers and sisters, come and join us and become part of the United Farm Workers, right? That's what you saw in the Teatro Campesino. That's what you see within muralism. What? We use house paint because that's what we have. What might be left over from our garage. I think one of my more important pieces was done with wood stain on newspaper, because that's what I had. And it was the moment a young man had been shot, and I was devastated by that experience. And I came home and I walked into my garage, there was the wood stain, and that's what became the painting of a piece called Killed by a Placa. And that piece is like, one of my oldest pieces, and a piece that was done with Rascuache, right? You were not looking at precious. You were not looking at expensive. You were looking at what would do, what could be made with the mud of the river, for example. Great story of the Montoya's family. Mother going down to the river and watching the river drop, and then taking mud from the river at various times because it changed color, and bringing it in buckets up to the house. And on her adobe, washing on the different colors of the mud at different times, which made a gorgeous, deep, rich brown. That's Rascuache.
That was good. That was good. Okay, more technical question.
Rascuache is not technical?
So, can you explain what the pouncing technique is and how you use that method for Uprising of the Planetas?
Okay. Yeah.
When you're ready.
I don't remember using the pouncing method for Uprising Mujeres. I can't remember. I think I only used it for part of it. That I probably did the other by a grid. I gridded it and then did the classic method. Although at the Taller Siqueiros, which is where I had just come back from, we were using compass methods, because the maestro said that the squares, the grids, and then the drawing in of the outlines created a flat piece, and that for it to get three-dimensional, we needed to use compasses, which would then make it possible for you to draw volumes of forms. And that would change the way the piece looked, as opposed to the outlining of a line drawing. The Pounce method is a way of doing a very close resemblance of the original drawing. And I guess it's closest here with the work we're doing in this room is the closest to Pounce. But we're able, in this case now, saving hours and hours. And the more hours that you can save in the transfer, the more hours you can buy at the end for finish. That means you can do a higher finish work. So this has actually gone, the drawings have gone into the computer. They're replicated exactly by the printing method that we're using in this new technique of a direct print to the wall. And our printer is an amazing printer that goes up and down, a vertical printer. And it takes the drawings and there's no distortion. So if you project an image, for example, you've got the drawing and you put it into an opaque projector, or you take a photograph of it and you send it up with a slide projector, you will have distortion depending on where you're placing the camera or the projection system. To get exact imagery, the most perfect way of doing it is either the Pounce, which is laborious, or this new technique we're using. Michelangelo used the Pounce, right? And the Pounce was, again, it's like these big papers have to go up. When at the Great Wall we used Pounces, it was really terrifying because the Pounces would go up in these big rolls. And you know, the rolls were 5 feet, the mural's 10 feet. So the first roll would be the top. And I would have a group of 20 kids rolling out the roll of the drawing, right? And they would put it on upside down, right? It doesn't matter. I mean, it could be upside down. I'm going, what's wrong with that? Oh, the whole upper half is upside down, right? Or the wind would take it. So the wind would be moving the Pounces, right? So it wasn't practical. It was really difficult. We used the grid system, this laborious grid system, for all of the early segments of the Great Wall. And I then had to teach young people to read a ruler. They didn't even read the rulers. They didn't know how to read rulers. And to transfer inch by inch, which took so much time before we're actually doing the painting. So the Pounce, classic historical method in which you transfer the drawing and then you punctuate holes along the drawing that gets some distortion, it can be distorted in some way. The paper goes up and then you pounce it with graphite or charcoal, and then you pull off the paper, and there is a connect the dots set of images. And there's fallacies in doing it that way as well. This one, this technique, it's right on the money and fast.
Nice. Okay, once this is done, do you need more mustard? Ketchup?
I'm done.
Relish.
A little relish, yeah.
The relish would probably help. Okay.
I melted pretty fast. My finger must be still sending off heat.
Okay, we're almost done.
Now planes.
Coming for us.
That's a helicopter.
So, airport?
Huh?
Airport around here?
Yeah, there's a Santa Monica airport. This is, but that's a helicopter, so it's probably police. Last night, a woman in Santa Monica had a homeless person climb the second story, come in her balcony, and stand in her bedroom naked trying to get her.
Oh my God.
That was all over the newspaper this morning, and our neighbor-to-neighbor stuff. We're having such a homeless problem.
Scary.
I mean, second floor, that guy was,
That's bionic.
yeah.
Okay. So the next question is about the additions you made to the image over the years. And so this is an example of what the conservator found. It's like the glint in the eyes like you made little additions after the painting was done, but you started adding more detail across the years. So could you talk about why did you do additions after it was done already? Do you remember what additions were done beyond like the eyes and things like that?
No, probably, I don't know, except that I probably, I felt that her eyes looked dead when I came back to it, and that, and I could see that I very often now use a glint in the people's eyes, which is a reflected light, and it depends on where the light is coming from, right? So probably it was just an enhancement that struck me at that particular moment, and I was doing cleanup on the piece, doing a little bit of cleaning, and enhancing the color. But it's remarkable how close that I didn't do more. I kind of controlled myself to not change the image, because I really felt like it was a moment in time, and that I wanted to preserve that moment.
What was going on at that time in your life when you were working on the mural?
In that particular moment, I was opening, it was 1976, 77.
Could you rephrase it to include at the time I was working on the mural?
Okay. At the time I was working on the uprising, I had just come back from Mexico, and I had, a journal full of new thoughts, inspired by visiting more of the murals, and being in relationship to Luis Arenal and to the other people who work with the maestro, and studying more carefully the way composition was done, and also the criticism that came from the Mexicanos to the Chicanos, which I thought was really well placed. It was a little hard for my team, members of the Chicano community to hear it, but they said, you guys know nothing about composition. You plop an image in the middle of a wall without thought. And I thought, yeah, that's right, that's what we do. I mean, we're happy to get the wall, and we're very oftentimes trying to get it up before they stop us, right? So I got that compositionally, that I had to integrate not only within the context of the wall, but with outside of the context of the wall, the environment around the mural. That I had to do a wider view, that it wasn't just peripheral vision, it was ambient vision. It was a vision of the whole, and integrating to that the people who were part of that story. So I began to be more, my arms opened wider, and they basically included more. So that's the kind of thing that was happening creatively for me, to think in a different way, and to feel affirmed about what I was thinking as a feminist. I took a lot of criticism from the Chicano community for being a feminist. Most women would not have called themselves at that time. And to encourage, for example, women showing together, for Chicanos to show together, that was convincing. It took convincing to do the Venice de la Mujer show at the Women's Building. They didn't really think that was a great idea. That we needed not to separate ourselves from the men. I think the African American women went through a similar thing about trying to find their own agency and their own capacity. And I was going through a rather big, feminist thought about who I would become. I left my husband. I was in a relationship with a woman. I was changing how I thought about the world and what I was going to do with my life. I was opening an art center, and I didn't really intend to build an art center, but I knew that in order to do what I wanted to do, that I needed to have the structure, and that the structure did not exist that would support it. So I had to invent it, and I had to build it. And I also knew that while I was criticized by the Chicanos, I mean, I remember the guys coming in from Chicano Park and basically saying, why are you doing this Great Wall that includes all these other ethnic groups? Why are you doing that? You know, you could make a big Chicano work and you should be doing that. And I remember having this argument with them about that and saying, look I was born in Watts. I grew up in a black community. I mean, I'm living in a place that is a city founded by African American and Latinos and Mexicanos. I mean, Sonora Town, and you know the very beginning of the founders. This is my experience, and the Great Wall needs to be inclusive, and it needs to look at if we could ever put ourselves together. In other words, if I said this, if African American and Latinos ever could get together, we could control the city. We could change the things that are going on. We could deal with the banishment of Wilkinson and people like him. And that's why my organization was mixed race. And that's why my board was mixed race. And that's why artistic control was still always held by Latinos. And that's what we still do today. And I'm...
Could you say that last part? Just
Your mixed race board, you could go, you'd end where you said mixed race board and then,
I said, that's why I founded the organization with a mixed race staff, mixed race board, and kept the artistic control within the hands of Latinos, right? Because I felt that that was the core of the city and that the aesthetic should come from that. But I welcomed, a lot of people were coming. Judith Chicago was building the women's, the dinner party down the street. Women were coming from that program, you know, saying, you know, we want to work interracially, and that's not happening at the women's building. The women's building was not entirely supportive of gay women. Even at the beginning, they did not want it to be defined as lesbian. So there was, you know, Arlene Raven, there was Sheila de Bretteville, and there was Judy Chicago, who were key, brilliant women. And I went to a lecture by Arlene Raven, who's long gone now, in which I sat for 2.5 hours, and she showed image after image of women artists from all over the world. And it was transformative. I mean, I had a degree in art. I had never seen this work. I started to learn about Emily Carr. I started to learn about, you know, Frida Kahlo. All I started to learn about women worldwide that we had never studied. And so I was having this transformation around going to the women's building, listening to Audre Lorde, having women migrate from Judy Chicago's dinner party to work with me. That's how Christina Schlesinger came, and Donna Deitch was doing Desert of the Hearts with Jane Rule's book and doing the great lesbian novel and the first lesbian feature film. That was all coming out of Spark, and we were transforming an old jail into a community center. So that was what was going on, and it was a really important growth period for me in terms of the way I was designing and working. And I did a piece as I opened Spark in Highland Park that is still up in the community, about 200 feet long, work on the history of Highland Park. And it was on the telephone company building. And the telephone company was getting its windows broken, and you know, the community was transforming, and so I did the front of this. Part of the reason I went to Mexico is because they wanted me to guarantee the length and time of the mural. And there was nobody, they thought, okay, the Mexicans know how to do this. Of course they didn't. They said to us when we came, what, you come from the United States that have all the technology and all the aspects, you have access to every material and product, you guys know. You know, you will know more than we do. You know, the maestro was using asbestos. You know, he was using this Polytechnic materials that were coming from cars, and they didn't have the answers. They were struggling with long-term maintenance of works. And still today, their conservation budgets are like under $200,000 a year for all these major works, right? I was serving on the Diego Rivera's daughter's foundation for the last years as she was trying to preserve her father's work and trying to control the use of that imagery. And conservation was just not something Mexico was putting money into, right? So it was a fallacy thinking that we were going to find the answers there. And it brought me back to thinking, we have to find the answers here. So I started experimentation with coatings, with the materials that we were using, and tried to advance the kind of materials we were using, making sure we were using the best pigmentation. You know, we couldn't like go to, there was this paint called Cal Western. It was stuff you buy in what was a Standard Brands, you know, paint dealership, and it was the kind of stuff people painted fences with. I mean, we used, that was what a squatchy, we used whatever we could get. And it wasn't always good material. It was not. I mean, like, there was a guy who worked for the Department of Rec and Parks, and he was the father of the band Tierra. His kids were in the performers. And he would bring us these 5-gallon drums of paint that then you put pigmentation in, and that's how you would get color. That's how mi abuelita was painted. That's why she's pink. That's why that poncho was pink, because that's all we could make with mixing the pigmentation into the white paint. Well, that was terrible paint. It was terrible paint. We didn't have access, right? I had scaffolding that came from a garbage dump, and literally trying to clean out all kinds of creatures that were growing inside the poles, and not having the right safety equipment, and we worked with almost nothing. And it wasn't until 1974 then when I got the first funding from the city council against the urging of Wilkinson. We had the first monies to buy a truck, to buy scaffolding, to actually begin to get the right kind of materials. And I ran the program with basically gang members and neighborhood kids. I didn't have enough money to hire staff. And we were out of the old swim stadium, right now where the Lucas Museum is being built, right? I worked out of the swim stadium downtown. So anyway, Rasquachi, right? Make do with what you can get and just keep going. Just keep going.
Great. Okay, this is the last question. You're doing great.
You think I'm crazy, huh?
No. It's good. Okay. So what did you hope that the Smithsonian Conservation of Uprising of Mujeres would achieve?
It's preservation. I thought it was...
Rephrase it.
Okay, I hope that when the Smithsonian would do the conservation, that they would bring more sophisticated techniques to looking at the work in a new way. I mean, we had reached the limits of our knowledge, and we didn't have much help, from people like the Getty, for example, who should have been more deeply engaged in the conservation of LA murals. But I approached the Getty repeatedly, saying, please help us. We're losing the legacy of the murals of Los Angeles. And 30 years into the production, we started to see them disappearing from the streets. They were being painted over, they were being damaged. And the moment we stopped having funding, we lost funding from the city, then we couldn't take another generation and put them into muralism. And we started to have the giant proliferation of graffiti and tagging. And it became just about getting your name up. It was no longer about making a statement. It was no longer the capacity to work in a tradition of the Mexican muralists. And we watched the whole thing degrade. And that was one of the hardest parts for me, to having put so much energy into the placement of hundreds of murals in the city, and then watching that whole denigration of that art form, and not being able to find the support in the places that We should have found it. At a certain point, the Getty should have stepped forward. They did reluctantly step forward to the preservation of America Tropical, but we all thought that they were going to restore it. They had no intention of restoring it. They just basically preserved it. And even at the end, when they were all done, they weren't even sure they wanted to open it to the public. They brought me in and said, "What would your people think if we never opened this?" Right? I couldn't figure out what my people were. What, old women over 50, muralists, chica, which one of my identities, right? So, I guess I'm sort of waxing off in a different direction in terms of what you asked, but I hoped that we could find.
Hold on. Let's hold that thought, and then we'll wrap it up.
I knew that we didn't use the best techniques in terms of materials. I knew that the uprising was not done with the best materials or the fanciest building, and that it could have been done better. And that now it had remarkably stayed in good shape, even though it had been moved all over the place. And that I was hoping for its conservation and preservation, and perhaps insight in how we would do better in the future in terms of working. I think portable murals have really great power. I would never put something on masonite again, right? And there are new materials that we could really look at that could do portability. And I think one of the things that we're working on right now is portable. These are portable pieces. These pieces could travel. They're really lightweight. This material is unwoven fabric, takes the paint really well, and can then be placed into onto the wall and put there permanently, or it can actually perhaps provide the model for a technique that would print these images that have been hand painted on the wall, and we would not have to put these pieces in a public environment. So those are kind of the things that I'm playing with right now. I don't know which of these techniques is going to end up on the wall, but they'll be beautifully painted, and it might be important for them to move about and to be preserved rather than being placed in a flood control channel with raging water and 115 degrees of heat and direct sunlight, and then watch the denigration of those works over the years. The Great Wall was up 35 years, 40 years, and was still there, but needed a major restoration. And a restoration of that scale, half a mile, was $1 million. This would make it possible for us not to have to spend that kind of money to preserve a work. Anyway, we need to advance muralism in such a way that conservation is critically part of it, that we can't see works that are telling a story that needs to obviously continually be told. The issues of our immigrant labor, the issues of our people in communities who have much to give and have contributed enormous amounts, we tell those stories in the murals that we make. We need to preserve that work so that people remember a history and not become absent completely to the history, so that they think that what they're seeing at that particular moment is the whole truth. That's how they can be deceived. And we're watching massive deception, and that's because they have no history. There could not be another Trump.
Great. Okay, that's it. We are done.
You're going to end with there cannot be another Trump?
So we were hoping, now you got a cover, right?
Yeah.
We would like, if you feel still like it, it's fine if you don't, but could you tell us more about your growing up, how your education or things like that. We were reading about you could not speak Spanish in school because it was forbidden. People didn't like things like that. So more about your initial background, whatever you want to tell us about that.
Okay.
Sounds good.
You want to do that now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think my people are on break. Yeah.
Will do that? Is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, as long as you're still feeling up for it, yeah.
Okay. I can do it.
This will be the last question. Last? This will be the last?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can finish that if you want, and then.
So how'd the interview go?
Great. Great. No, it's really good to get that conservation angle. That's very rare, and that will help with that aspect of this project with Wendy and the conservator.
Conservation ends up being censorship in the rear.
Yeah. Especially for painting. I mean, painting is where it happens.
Well, you decide what's conserved. Therefore, you get to decide what stays alive. And you watch it. All the zapatas disappeared from the streets. I told you the kind of images that can't be made. This whole section, the donut rats. Let's see how that goes.
It'll be a fan favorite. It'll be a favorite, for sure.
Do you think?
I think so. A controversial favorite.
Oh, it was amazing in the museum. It's like, every day I'd be painting, I'd turn around, everybody's black. How did all these black people get here? Because we were in the black section, and we're burning down Watts, and I see these older women standing there with their hands on their hearts, and I look at them and said, you were there. Yeah. It's just like that. It was like that. And then when the gay section went up, all of a sudden there were all these little couples coming, these little girls holding hands, these little guys coming in. I was a bartender, and it was like amazing. I guess it must have been social media that gets them all out, like in minutes, right? It was incredible. Cool.
So, you had a question about her education? What was the question?
So I think the general question is like, what inspired you to pursue this art form and this career, and however that tied into growing up and your background. Yeah.
Okay.
And that'll be our last thing, and then we're gonna go get you some more ice.
They're like, cut off your fingertips.
And when you answer, you can keep looking at Claudia.
Okay.
Since we're behind the camera.
When does it stop hurting? Maybe never?
Hopefully soon.
Oh God, I'm so glad it's not my right hand.
I'm glad the mustard helps. That's amazing. Who knew?
I know, it's really weird. I have never heard of that before. New conservation technique.
Conservation of the body.
Okay. Education.
And beginning of muralism.
Okay.
Beginning of the arts. And the arts.
Why did I become a muralist? Well, okay, so I actually, unlike a lot of my young people today, there was really no possibility for me to go to UCLA, right? Or any of the universities UC system I thought I would go to Santa Barbara. It would get me far enough away from my family that I'd be able to, pursue my interests. My mother said, I don't know, why are you going into the arts? Why don't you become a lawyer and you could sue somebody, right? My mother having a sort of activist bent all of her life as working in social service. The state university was what I could do. And I had to pay for that myself. So I worked full-time going to the university. And then I majored in art, much to my mother's chagrin. And she said, if you're going to do that, then you need to be a teacher. You need to have something that you can go to make money. So I pursued art education. And I went through I had a really wonderful professor in drawing, Hans Burkhardt, who was a guy who spent a lot of time in Mexico doing drawings in Oaxaca and in Guanajuato, and a really great teacher. And so I was going to go into teaching, and I thought I would teach high school. I had a particular penchant for working with adolescents, growing up in neighborhoods where there was all these little struggles and between neighborhoods, and I thought that that I would probably do well, teaching the difficult kids. So I got all the way to master teaching, and I was sent to work in Van Nuys. And I was working in a junior high school, and there was a woman who was my master teacher, the master teacher as you're doing your student teaching. And there was a little guy who made this piece that was this faceted bird, and a little 14-year-old. And I was coming in once a week, and this bird was on his desk, gorgeous looking bird, very pre-Columbian, and obviously he'd seen Mexican work. I loved his bird, and from one week to the next, it disappeared. It came back and it wasn't there, and I said, Julio, what happened to your bird? He said, it was wrong. I said, what do you mean it was wrong? He said, it's just wrong. Look. And he pointed to the blackboard. On the blackboard, there was those hallmark birds, the little shapes, right? And the teacher had put it up, the hallmark birds, drawn them up there as part of a math lesson. There were this many birds on the line, this many flew away, how many are there now? But she used the illustrations that she drew. He said, those are right, and mine was wrong. I thought, this is a person who is going to teach me to be a teacher. And I said, that's not going to work. I can't do this. So I came back and I went to my professor and I said, I quit. I'm not going to do this. He said, you can't quit. He said, you really are a talented teacher. I said, I don't know how you know that. I just can't do it. I mean, if I work with this old white lady, I'm going to end up hating my students or hating the work I'm doing, and I'm going to be a bad teacher. It's going to be the wrong teaching. And I have enough respect for teaching that I understand how people can influence you. So I had graduated from Catholic high school, which was where Cheech Marin and I went to school. And he was in the same class as I was, at Alameda High School. And I went back to my teacher, who was one of my mentors. And it was a woman named, sister, who was named Sister Louise Bernstein. And her father was Jewish, and her mother was Catholic. And I said, I quit. She said, you didn't. I said, I did. I'm not going back. First of all, the classes are stupid. They're really stupid. you know. And I said, I can teach people more by sending them to County General Hospital on Friday night. If I was teaching, I'd be sending them there. I'd make them sit in that room from 7 o'clock to 2 in the morning. They would learn more there than in any of those classes. They would watch the shooting victims, the people who've been stabbed. They would watch the anguish of these communities. They would see what I see. And she said, well, okay, I hear you. Come teach for me. So I ended up teaching in Alamany High School. Within 1 year, I was director of the art department. I did my first mural at Alamany High School. They just let me go. I mean, she was just like, you're going to do this? What do you mean you're going to do it? Okay, do it. And I developed this program for 9th graders. It was called Allied Arts. And it was about integration of poetry, music, visual arts, and dance in one course. So that what I asked them to do was to take something that was really affecting their lives and to present it with multiple forms. And the whole grade was at the end of the quarter or the semester to present that work. So my kids went wild. They were dropping giant drawings out of 2-story buildings. They were presenting musical events in the football field. They were doing all these amazing things on really important topics. And I was loving the teaching. I was like having a great time. And of course the war was going on. And the sisters and I, were organizing vigils and marches against the war in Vietnam. And one day we had a mass. I was a very religious kid. I mean, I grew up with a very religious family, very Catholic. My grandmother I thought she had some kind of special connection to Jesus, right? I mean, but, you know, Francisco was something else. I mean, she was really a curandera. I mean, she was a healer. And she pretty much raised me because my mother was a single mother. I didn't even know what the word father meant until a black kid in the neighborhood said to me, you know, you don't have a father. And then I came back into my grandmother and said, ¿Qué quiere decir father? I didn't even know what the word was, right? And my mother was supporting us all working in the factory. Me, her mother, her younger sister, was a wonderful ranchera singer and a little bit wild, and my Aunt Delia, who was delivered by a doctor, the only doctor that had come into a place called Barrio Nuevo, or New Edition in Colorado, alongside the Arkansas River. And he delivered her with forceps and damaged her brain. So she never grew beyond 5 years old in development, and she was my best friend. She was great. She was tall. She could pick me up and I could say, get me up there, there's candy up there, and there's also cigarettes. So I'll get your cigarettes, you get my candy, right? So we had this sort of deal, right? I didn't speak English. And my mother was working in the factory, and I was in Watts at 83rd and Central, in a single bedroom, little casita, duplex, where the iceman came and dropped the ice into the chutes, and next door neighbors were all black, and the kid said, I don't have a father. And I saw the first TV come in. There was only 4 inches, and giant back part of it, and I watched. The very first thing was what was that? Hopalong Cassidy, and I guess later Sheriff John. But we watched the black hats and the white hats. The black hats being the bad guys, the white hats being the good guys. And then I said to my grandmother, "Oh, that's like my dad because it was a black hat." She goes, "Yeah, that's like your dad." My mother never told my father I was born. He was stationed in Los Angeles, and in the Navy, and they met at the Palladium. My mother was a dancer. And, you know, both she and her sisters were raging beauties. I mean, so they were really beautiful women who took a lot of pride in being beautiful. And she was, you know, that's where she met him. And he was a musician. He got shipped out, and she was pregnant. And then she had no way of reaching him. I didn't find out until what was it, just 5 years ago, who he was. So that's the story. Matriarchal, okay? Total matriarch. So going into school, my mother married an Italian. My stepfather she said, never marry a Mexican, right? Because you will be controlled and tortured by the men. And that's because she had all these brothers. And her older brother said, you know, that little girl is mine. So all my life, my tío was ready to take me. And that was good because my stepfather didn't really want to have an illegitimate child in his life. And the moment he raised a hand to me, my Uncle Chuy, who was a boxer, said, you raise a hand again, I'm coming to get her and taking her. So I had a protector. It's a classic thing. Now, I've had protectors like this my whole life. When I worked in the East Side and I was in the heart of gang warfare, I had protectors. I didn't even notice that that was happening to me, except I went in with the gang members from Evergreen Gang to get a donation from the guy, from the meat guy. You know, he sold meats, and I said, we were having an event for the dedication of our mural on Mott and 2nd Street. Would you mind donating some hot dogs and hamburgers? And the guy said, what do you want? Anything you want. I thought, wow, how nice he is. And I walked out with the guy. I said, did you see how much he gave us? He goes, yeah. I looked at the guys and I go, oh my God, we just did extortion. I had 2 gang members standing alongside of me. You're not going to say no to me. You know, when the cops came to get me because I was working with the gang members, they said, you organize them, we'll arrest them. And they said, come over here, come over to the car. I go, no. And Fernando and Pepe would be standing next to me and say, don't move. I said, no, they're telling me I have to come here. Don't move. He said, they can't make you because they have to have a warrant. I said, okay. I didn't move. I said, no, I'm not going there. And the 2 guys were standing there, and these guys opening and closing their handcuffs. They didn't want to get me. These stories, I don't even know if I should tell them. That's the stories, and more, and more. You think it's about art? I'm going to write a book someday. It's going to say, I don't know why they're trying to kill me. It's only art. It was really that kind of struggle. So when I came out and these stupid teachers were trying to teach me to make Juan change his little birds into Hallmark cards, and I started to teach in the Catholic high school, I just went all that way until I got fired. And I got fired with all the nuns for organizing against the war. And maybe because I projected the My Lai massacre behind the Mass. Seemed appropriate to me. In the 1970s, in that piece, you'll see my section on the My Lai massacre. And we all went. And they broke up that group of women that were the most amazing teachers. I don't know what people say about the nuns, but these were great women. They were great basketball players. They'd hike up their skirts and pull back their you know, hats and stuff. They were rough. They were, you know, they didn't let me get away with anything. And they took me out of Pacoima Junior High, which saved my life. I couldn't have ever made it from San Fernando and Pacoima Junior High. I was too fair. Gabacha falsa. Here I am, green-eyed, fair skin. So I got jumped over and over again. And I never fought. I never hit anybody. I didn't know how to fight. I know how to talk. I could humiliate them. I dealt with the Pachuca. So when I became the Pachuca, it was me taking on my cousin Esther and becoming her. But I wasn't allowed to be her because my mother was so strict. So a lot of what happened to me when I got through, like I got fired. But I did finish my master's in teaching, and then I went on. I was already at that point beginning the Great Wall, and my professor said to me, "Come, just present to us your master's, what you're doing, your proposals for the Great Wall, and we won't make you go through this other crap, because what you're doing is revolutionary, and we want this." And that's how I got my degree. My master's finally was done in that way, with a really wonderful doctor, Casa, who's now gone. I still have all of his drafting equipment. And then I went on from there and I got my doctoral also. So part of it was like just keeping a vision and holding the vision and doing the work. And why was it mural painting? I didn't have any aspirations to be in a gallery or in a museum because I never saw a woman, particularly a Latina, in one. There was no chance of that. What the hell? I couldn't even see us on a billboard. I couldn't see us in a movie. I couldn't see us in a... recognizing that recently, those examples, those possibilities weren't there. And that's why I endlessly, probably way too much, spend the time to meet with the little girls, to meet with the kids. When they come into LACMA, I stop. And I talk with 50 of them. You know, because they want to know, when did you know you were an artist? I said, I don't know, I was always an artist. When I went into school, elementary school, and my stepfather moved us from Watts to Pacoima, that was supposed to be an advance. It turned out to be a similar thing. I mean, Pacoima was not it was another rough neighborhood. And I went into Haddon Avenue Elementary School. I was separated from my grandmother, which was truly traumatic for me. And English became English only in my household because of my Italian stepfather. And when I went into school, there was a really smart teacher who gave me little silver cans with tempera colors and newsprint, and set me aside to draw and paint. And so while everybody else was doing reading lessons, I was painting. And then I gradually began to explain the paintings. That's how I learned English.
Okay,
Thank
we're
you for
done.
sharing.
Thank you. You made it. Fully intact almost.
Wait?
Fully intact almost, minus your hands.
Yeah.
You can keep it. You can keep
Oh,
it,
thank you.
or you can sign it.
I needed a red
Some
one like this.
sign-in.
No, I'll sign it for you. It's a little wet, a little dry out, and it smells a little like mustard. Actually, it's not hurting as bad right
No,
now.
that's good.
Maybe it's finally got the heat out of it. Anyway, I gotta say, I was like, that's a lot to cover, right?
We covered a lot. No, it's good.
Actually, I think it's starting to hurt less finally, but it was so extreme. I mean, your fingertips are not to be burned.
No, they're not. Unless you're being tortured.
Oh my God, I can see this would be torture, right? And then it's like, the one that was I could only really feel this one, but it's burned on the other ones too.
It's not wanting to feel that kind of pain that I don't live in Ciudad Juarez anymore.
And see that what?
Because in Ciudad Juarez, because you never know what's going to happen.
I know, God. You can't be a girl there. I just told him some horrible stories. I never know whether those things should be published, frankly. I mean, it's like, it sounds pathetic. I mean, it's like, I don't want people to think I'm whining, but that's what happened.
It helps.
Hmm?
It helps. Contextualize.
That's it, because what is it,
I understand.
what does it do? What good does it do?
Well, number one, it changes the narrative of the affluent singular artist.
Yeah.
Like the singular genius artist, that number one. Two, it makes a poor person have a voice where you never have a voice. You're like, it's not New York based. I mean, every fine art story is like, I then moved to New York.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it always has that same little dialogue of narrative.
Mm-hmm.
That's huge. That already is just huge.
Yeah.
That it's that. It's also so taboo in the art world to talk about being poor. Unless you're like chosen poor. Like, oh, I decided to go on my own or something like that. You know? It's a big deal.
Well, my mother actually, the interesting thing about this story is that my mother didn't really get it ever until I won the Hispanic Heritage Award, and we went to D.C. We were at the Kennedy Center, and I had to go up and speak. And at that moment, I wanted to talk about the teachers. I wanted to talk about Sister Louise Bernstein and you know, the other teachers that had influenced me. And I walked back to after I got done with my talk, I came back, my mother was crying. I said, Hortensia, what's the matter? Did I do something wrong? And she said, no. She said, how was I to know that you were gifted? And I thought, of course. How would she know? She never met anybody. She said, there were no gifted Mexicans in my life. So it's really important for us to acknowledge that there are gifted kids. And to immediately, that's why I did the piece at the County General Hospital. I did this whole piece for mothers. More children are born in that county hospital. And I did a piece of these babies being born and a big quilt. The kids are painting these things in the quilt. And each of the quilt pieces is from a little kid that I put in the piece. And that piece has been there over 30 years. Again, sitting there telling the story over and over again to acknowledge the gift of creativity. And the child is being given this lotus flower of this. You can't help it. You might have a baby and the baby turns out to be this gifted musician. Well, just get ready, because you've got to deal with it. You know where they come from. I don't know where they come from, but they just do, right? And I wouldn't have even said I was gifted, really. But now, in the long course of it, I got to say, yeah, there was probably some points along the way that we could have identified that I was a gifted kid, right? But it would never have been said to me. Never, even when I was going through school.
Not back then.
No.
They would make us take tests in Texas to do for that.
They take what?
Take tests, like just like spatial reasoning or something like that.
Yeah, no, it's all about, I had really high verbal skills, but I didn't have, you know, like on an SAT and stuff, it was like really high in that, in the verbal skills. But I don't know that anybody could have identified a visual artist at that point.
Yeah, that's harder for the tests to classify.